In this first lesson, we are going to see a general description of what is life, which are the main changes that has happened in the history of life, and a specific point of two of the characteristics, sex and multicellularity, as strategies of life. As basic concepts of life, just two very, very simple questions. The basic units of life, in all cases, are cells. Cells are the unit of function in life. Some living beings are just a single cell, others have millions and trillions of cells. In all the cases, cells are the basic unit. And the second point is the existence and the importance of DNA, which is the molecule that carries the genetic information. We are going to see much more on that in the following lessons. If we want to understand what is life, we could have a view of several of the characteristics of life. For example, among these characteristics, we have that life has an organization, always is very well structured, organized in time and in space. Metabolism, meaning that there are thousands of reactions that are at the base of creating, of producing energy and transforming the chemical products. Homeostasis, which is the way in which life preserves from the environment, making an internal environment by itself. Growth, in the sense of incorporating from the external world products that is going to increase the amount of life, the amount of cells, the amount of living beings. Reproduction, a way of making children, making new living forms. Response, a way of interacting with the environment, capturing what the environment is, and last but not least, evolution, in which we have the way in which life expands through time. Leslie Orgel defined life in a very nice way. He said that life were citrons, meaning complex information transforming, reproducing objects that evolve by natural selection. This is a very nice definition because it has this idea of transforming matter, energy, information, and transcending time by reproduction at small scale and evolution by natural selection in making life endurable in time. So, life in space, life in time. When we see this life in time, there are main changes that life has undertaken during evolution. This is what Eor Sadsmari and John Maynard Smith call the major transitions in evolution. It's interesting to have a look at that because these are the transitions that have very specific characteristics and that tells us which are the main adaptations, the main changes that have happened in the history of life. The first one is the replicating molecules, meaning that this idea of replication, of doing more of the same or variations on the same theme, is a basic property of life. It's the property of life for endurance in time that already existed when life began and were just replicating molecules. Afterwards, these replicating molecules united among themselves, making what we call chromosomes. After that, we have the transitions of RNA, which is a variant of DNA, but that is very probable that was the basic molecule having the information in the primitive life, and it changed into the DNA that we know today as the base for genes, and at the same time proteins which are encoded in the DNA that have the properties of enzymes, helping the transformation of products. Next major transitions is how life went from single cells to cells with the nucleus in which the DNA is stored. This change is extremely important because it allows the transition between the prokaryotes, nowadays existing, for example, as bacteria, and eukaryotes that we are ourselves. We have the next one is sexuality, meaning that life began with asexual clones, and sexuality in the sense of sharing the genetic information between individuals was at the base of the reproduction. Next was to go from a single eukaryotic cell into a wide amount of cells for the multicellular organism, meaning that all the cells united to make a new individual. Next main transition was from solitary individuals into colonies, meaning that individuals united among themselves, creating sociality. And last, our own main change, that is the transition between the primate societies into human societies, with the important change mainly in language. Two characteristics are going to be especially stressed. One is sex as one of the main transitions, and here I would like to stress that the biological meaning of sex is of exchanging genetic information between individuals. This exchange may be related to reproduction or not. In bacteria, they may exchange the DNA without reproduction, but in most of the life, it has been tied, the sexuality with reproduction. And this is interesting because means that to make a new individual is not enough to have the genetic information of a single one, but of two that are going to be united to make a new individual. It's very interesting to see the importance of sex in life, because when we put together the genetic information of two individuals, we create a new kind of life, a genetic novelty in the next generation. And this has been extremely successful in the history of life, and life has been really much more evolvable with the nearly obligation of having genetic exchange or sex for reproduction. The other interesting major change is multicellularity. In this case, we have to consider that the basic unit of life is the cell. And one of the major transitions is the union of many of these single individuals to create a new individual, a new I. Here, it's very interesting because it requires a lot of characteristics that each cell in our organism must know what the other cells are doing. Among them, they have to communicate, they have to signal, they have to have a coordination, they have to stick together, they have to have adhesion, a regulation of their growth. That's compulsive in the sense that when this is going to be default on that is when we are going to have cancer. The different cells in a given organism are going to differentiate in different ways, and here comes all the gene regulation. At the very end, with multicellularity, we have the use of the eye of its cell to create a new eye for the whole multicellular individual. And we are going to see in other lessons how, in some cases, this eye is going to grow up into what we can call a society. At the very end, in this lesson, what we have seen is a materialistic and mechanistic view of life that explains its emergence, its complexification, and its evolution through time by natural selection. Life may be contemplated as a physical system, but their specific properties ask for understanding of the mechanisms of perpetuation in time and change. What we are seeing is life as a mechanistic and materialistic entity that perpetuates through time.